Welcome to the Morrison Report. Hosted by Deval Morrison, sales representative for Bosley Real Estate Limited Brokerage. Ms. Morrison has co-authored the best-selling book, Success Today, with Brian Tracy, and has been interviewed on NBC, ABC, and CBS affiliates by Bob Guinea from The Bachelor. Deval, a real estate investor, has spoken to many attendees at her real estate seminars and is currently ranked in the top 5% of agents in her brokerage. Join me in welcoming your host, Deval Morrison.
Welcome to the Morrison Report. I wanted to create a podcast that would give people insights into the Toronto real estate market. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Deval Morrison or like my business page on Facebook. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today we have with us Lucy Brand. She is a co-owner of Toronto Condo Staging and Design. Thanks so much for joining us, Lucy. How are you?
Hi, Deval. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Tell me a little bit about Toronto Condo Staging. What do you guys do and how did you come about?
Sure, that's a good question. Well, my husband and I started this company 15 years ago. I can't believe it's that long, but it is.
Wow.
He was in the design industry for 20 years before that, and I was doing a little bit of everything. I was in the publishing industry, actually, and we started our family, and at the time, he wanted to do something on his own, and so it was the birth of this brand new industry. No one had heard of home staging.
Right.
You know, we were one of, I think there was only one or two people listed at that time that did it. And we thought it was interesting because Darren, who'd been in design, said, you know, I'm tired of designing people's homes, and it's hard because you have to deal with the husbands who don't understand why they're spending money on drapery. And then I got into staging, then got it because we told them if you put this much money into your home to make it look good, you're going to get money out at the back end. And men understood that. So that is literally one of the deciding factors of why we got into staging 15 years ago.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. So what's your process for staging? How do you sort of approach it?
So I like to start with what staging means because it kind of covers a wide range of items.
Sure.
But the easiest way to sum it up is the process of preparing your home for sale. So that can involve, you know, really anything from painting and repairs, minor renovations and upgrades. But I think the biggest part for most people is the depersonalizing and decluttering. And it's really about packing up, honestly. It's whatever you don't need, you pack it. And I tell people that it's if you're planning on purging old furniture, you really just have to get the process started. And so really we come in and we really get people on the path to preparing their home and helping them see things. Because sometimes it's just hard to see your house when you've been living there for a while.
Right.
And so the whole process of staging is, you know, we come in and we help people on that journey.
Cool. That's awesome. And so why do you think staging is so important for a condo or a house when it's out on the market? Well,
to be honest, buyers are really different nowadays. So I would say 20 years ago, I still hear this when I go in to talk to people. People are like, well, you know what? The new owners, they can take care of it. They can do the painting. They're going to rip up the carpet. They're going to decorate it to their own taste. I don't want to do it. And they still expect to get top dollar for their home.
Right.
And real buyers' attitudes are completely different. They are far pickier, if I can put it that way. They expect the sellers to do some work. They expect them to prepare it. But also, they don't have the time anymore. People are busier now than they've ever been.
Right.
And the time to do all of this, they want move-in ready. And if they find a fixer-upper, they want to, you know, that's what they're going to pay for. They're not going to give you top dollar. Those are the investors that are coming in trying to buy things at a bargain price. So I try to advise sellers nowadays that, you know, why do you do it? Because you don't want to leave money on the table. You really don't. So if you say to yourself, if I go in and the place is painted a color, the condition of the walls aren't good, and I say, you really need to paint. Oh, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave that for the new owners. And I tell them, hands down, almost 100% of the time, if someone comes in and they say, I've got to paint this place, it's going to cost the seller far more than it will cost the buyer to paint it. So it might cost you, say, $2,000 to do a paint job.
Right.
But the minimum discount someone takes off their offer is $5,000, $5,000 to $10,000. So in my process, I'm like, why would you leave any of that money on the table? And more than that, I think one of the most important things is that the pictures of a property really sell them now.
Right.
People are shopping online, right? They're looking online. They will scour. They'll say, I'm looking for a 2-bedroom condo or a 3-bedroom house in this particular area. And so they're looking at all the MLS listings. They're looking at the pictures online. And if those pictures don't speak to them, if they don't get a good visual, oftentimes they're the ones that get left, or they're the last ones seen. And so in my mind, pictures are everything.
Yeah, I would say you're right, absolutely, because people do spend a lot of time staring at the pictures before they even come out to take a look at a place.
They do. They do. And that's the other shift I was talking about. You know, before, realtors would just say, okay, you know, hop in the car, we're going to go see 20 houses. And they, don't get me wrong, I know you guys do a lot of that still, but most of the time, clients have at least seen the pictures of the property before going. They'll determine which places to go see based on those pictures. So when we're asking about why is staging so important, one of the big things I tell people, it's because we want those pictures to shine. You've got to outshine the competition, and staging is totally one of the keys that most realtors and most buyers are using, most sellers are using now.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, I think it makes a big difference when I'm taking a look at pictures, whether the place has been staged or not staged. And you're right, it is all about the pictures, because that is how everybody, realtors as well as the buyers, are looking at properties. So it makes a big difference.
And you know what's interesting is that it's because I'll still peruse online, and I might not be in the market, but I'm always curious to see what's out there. And every once in a while, I'll go on and I'll look at MLS pictures. I am still staggered to what kind of MLS pictures are still you can see online. So you might go and you'll look and you're like, staged, vacant. Oh, that was staged. People at least tidied up for that one. And then there's always that lone property that is like underwear is on the bed, you know, the groceries are all over the counters. And I'm like, wow, people will still literally take pictures of that and put that on MLS. And I just think it's such a disservice to do that, for one. But it still happens. When we first started, that was far more common than it is now. People, at least, I think probably because of, you know, what's available on TV now, right? There's been all kinds of staging shows on television and all kinds of education about real estate sales that it's become common knowledge, right? People understand they need to do something, and it's just getting them on board with, you know, how much should be done. And that's also part of our process. I think it's important we touch on that too, because I think that buyers are like, well, I'll just tidy up and that should be good enough. I'll give it a good clean, right?
Yeah.
And it's better than if it was dirty, right? I mean, that is one good thing. Yes, cleaning is important.
Right.
But I think that it's important to guide people in that journey, because I've gone into properties where, you know, they've literally stripped everything out of the house. So all of, you know, if they're living there when it's, you know, on the market, and a lot of buyers are, right? They're living in their homes and, you know, they're trying to sell it, and sometimes they have kids in the home. And I walk in and they've, you know, said, oh, we got it all ready for you. And they've stripped everything out of the house. So there's not a stitch of artwork on the walls. There's, you know, very little. They've left their sofa and their beds, and that's it. And the kids are wondering where their toys are. And, you know, it's interesting, you know, and I come in and I'm like, oh, you know, I encourage people, please wait till you talk to a stager if you can.
Right.
I have a great system because, you know, we come in and we do a consultation with people.
Perfect.
And that should be the first place that you start, right? And there's a reason for that. It's not the main reason for doing that consultation and talking with someone is that my training is to give people a plan, right? It's to say, okay, don't strip everything out. You know what? I know that you might be sick of that piece of art, but it's a great piece of art. We're going to use that. We're going to use your bed set and your end tables and your lamps. Please don't get rid of those things. They're like, oh, really? I thought you'd hate that. And I'm like, oh, no, it's great. We're going to use it, but we might move it around.
Right.
So I think one of the best things to advise people and for them to know is talk to someone when you know you're going to sell and you're at that decision-making process and you're talking to your realtor. You know, that's when you need to, before you start doing anything, talk to a stager, because that's our job. Our job is to sort of look at your home with some fresh eyes and give some, you know, perspective in terms of, and really it's just about making a plan with how to move forward and what to pack up, what not to, what renovations to do, what not to.
Right.
And really how to spend those, how much to spend, we usually leave to the realtor. We usually say, okay, look, we're going to set a budget here. You know, these are the things that I think are going to gain you the best return. For example, painting, and we can talk about that later. Mm-hmm. You know, freshening up your kitchen, doing some minor upgrades. But, you know, this is where you're going to get your return on that investment. You know, maybe ripping out, you know, something that you've hated forever isn't going to get you the return that you want. So our expertise is in knowing where to put those dollars so you get that return back.
Right. And what would you say when you go to preview a place are the biggest faux pas that you notice the most that your team sort of works really hard at correcting during the staging process?
We have seen some doozies, I tell you, in our 15 years. I think I tell people I've pretty much seen what I think I've seen everything. I'm sure that there's nothing much grosses me out anymore. But in terms of the faux pas, probably the most common one I sort of touched on is starting to do a renovation without getting advice.
Right.
So we're in a generation of DIYers and Pinterest and all of these things and of television. So the one thing I got to say is that I think people get inspired and they'll say, oh my gosh, I've watched that show and I know how to stage my home. And I know what we're going to do. We're going to renovate and we're going to upgrade and we're going to do all these things. And I'm like, that's great to have that motivation and inspiration. However, you will spend the best money of your life if you just get some advice from a professional.
Right.
And I have more costly mistakes made and bad renovation decisions made. And it was all, right before they're going on the market and things that you can't really change quickly. So for example, I went, one of the most recent ones is I went into a property with a single guy and sort of like a, handyman on the side, or at least he thought he was a handyman on the side.
Right.
And he renovated the kitchen. And, I walked in and I, saw this kitchen. I'm like, okay, at first glance, I'm like, this looks pretty good. And the first thing I realized, I said, why is your microwave so high? Like it was literally like I couldn't reach the handle. It was so high up. And he goes, well, yeah, I kind of installed it when I realized it was too high, but check this out. And he goes and there's a switch on the wall and he put it on a hydraulic lift.
Oh my
so
God.
that it would look like, you could imagine, it's like I could hear this engine running. It sounds like a fan. And the microwave lowers down as I'm standing there in front of me. And he was so proud of it. And I was like, I said, well, that is truly one of a kind. I've never seen that before. And he thought it was a great feature of the kitchen. And I'm saying to myself, oh, my word, he's got a hydraulic lift microwave. And these simple things that could have been avoided with some actual kitchen planning, right? It's not necessarily, a thing. And it's not like you're going to run into that everywhere. But I think by far making decisions like that, like renovating a kitchen and then not putting in a dishwasher, I've seen that several times.
Right.
And these are things that I can't necessarily fix. I can't stage a kitchen and just, add a dishwasher, right? I can't fix those things. But those are probably one of the number one things. But I think the other things I found are where people take out a closet, like if they're renovating a main floor, and they'll lose a main floor closet to open up a space, but then not add extra storage. Well, we know how in condos. And I'm like, to me, I walk in and I'm like, oh yeah, well, we took out the closet to make this room bigger. I'm like, well, that's great, but that was the only closet on this floor. And so, not taking storage into account, I find that people tend to do that when they're going to sell because they're not thinking about how they're going to live in it. Mm-hmm. They're just thinking about selling the space. And so that tends to be one of the ones, getting rid of storage. But I think when it comes to non-renovations and nothing major, I think one of the other big things that people do is they paint the wrong color all the time.
Right.
And this is for living. When people are living there, you can paint it whatever color you want, right? It's all about enjoying it yourself. But when it comes to selling, I've walked into, I can't even tell you how many properties, and a number of them, the realtor has given them the paint color. I will say this, a realtor has given them the paint color. And walk in and they're like, oh, I told them to paint it gray. And I walk in, and because of where it's situated in the building or, which way the house is facing, I walk in and it's an ice blue or it looks completely purple. And grays are a big color right now, right?
Right.
So grays are kind of in color. They're the new neutral. But if they've not tested it and checked it in their suite or their home and put a test patch on the wall and looked at it in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, they just went ahead and painted the whole place. And it literally, the worst was where it literally was purple. The house was purple. So by far, painting it the wrong color without either testing the color is one of those faux pas.
Yep.
I think another one of our favorites is when the people are living there and they've edited what they think is editing. So, I walk in and they're like, oh, I got rid of all of my clutter. And I walk in and it's still extraordinarily cluttered, but it's not cluttered to them. So and that's a big one because, people's homes, it's their home, right? And it's their stuff and it's their story and people get very attached to it. And and we can talk about that too, about people's attitudes towards staging. But I think one of the faux pas is that people tend